Bernie Sanders made a statement over the weekend saying he is very concerned about Israel's democracy. He even went so far as to say that he thinks Israel's government is racist. The U.S. Ambassador Thomas Nides says that Israel needs to pump the brakes on its judicial reform, as if the U.S. has any right to tell Israel that. Hamas calls on Israeli Arabs to commit terror attacks to quote-unquote end the occupation, and the defense ministry wants to limit access to Jews to the Temple Mount during the Muslim holiday of Ramadan. I'm Josiah, and this is the Israel Guys. Welcome to the Israel Guys, where we believe that in a world of Jew hatred and anti-Israel propaganda, you should have a direct connection to the land and people of Israel. Welcome back to the show, guys. First off, you know what to do. Make sure to subscribe, hit that thumbs up button, like button, thumbs up right below here if you like the show, if you like what we do. If you don't like it, just hit that dislike, the thumbs down button. That's also okay to do. Although it doesn't really help us. Like button really helps us out there. Also, hit that notification bell if you don't want to miss an episode of the Israel Guys. And if you share the content across social media, across the internet, wherever you are on social media, if you are at all, that would be greatly appreciated. Also helps us out immensely to get the word out, the truth of what's happening in Israel out to the entire world, to more and more people. We're now coming to you every day of the week, Monday through Friday. Every weekday, you can find us here at the Israel Guys talking about the true stories of what's happening in the land of Israel. So don't miss out. All right, we're going to pick on Bernie Sanders today because he made a statement over the weekend talking about Israel, about Israel's government, about democracy. Kind of made him, well, if you know any truth about Israel, made him look foolish. Because you know that all the stuff he said is false, even though it is his opinion. All the statements he made about what Israel is doing is indeed false. And I assume that if you're watching the show, then you're not a fan of Bernie Sanders. But even if you are, that's okay. Maybe you won't be a fan after you hear what he said about Israel and his view and his stance on support of the Jewish state from his perspective. Interestingly enough, Bernie Sanders is also Jewish. In an interview with CBS, Face the Nation, Bernie Sanders called Israel's government racist. He even said that the U.S. needs to have some strings attached to the billions of dollars of aid that the U.S. sends to Israel every single year. In this interview, the interviewer, Margaret Brennan, asked Bernie Sanders if he thought democracy was in peril in the state of Israel. Here's what he said.
I am very worried about what Netanyahu is doing and some of his allies in government and what may happen to the Palestinian people. The United States gives billions of dollars in aid to Israel. And I think we've got to put some strings attached to that and say you cannot run a racist government. You cannot turn your back on the two-state solution. You cannot demean the Palestinian people there. You just can't do it and then come to America and ask for money.
So first off, basically Bernie Sanders is calling Israel's government racist without any context, without saying why he thinks Israel is racist, without giving any reasons why the government would be racist in any context. Just throwing that out there. Israel's racist government. And he's also saying that he's very concerned about Israel's democracy. And as this has been going on, and it's quite the topic because there's a lot of back and forth in Israel. There's a lot of argument in Israel about the new judicial reforms. And then there's a lot of push from the left and basically in the left across the world saying that Israel is trying to end democracy by these judicial reforms. 100% false. You can go back and watch the shows. We've talked a lot about Israel's the new judicial reforms that they're trying to push through, and it's actually going to increase democracy in the state of Israel and specifically in the justice system in Israel itself. So, and I also thought it was rather ironic that Bernie Sanders was the one that was worried about democracy in Israel when he himself is one of the main politicians, you can say, that is pushing the Democratic Party towards the left. He's very progressive, has very socialistic views, and seems to be popular among a lot of the young people in the United States. Kind of ironic that he's the one that's very, very worried about Israel's democracy. But that was just something I thought was funny. Interestingly enough, he lied some more because all this stuff he said was not true. And another thing I want to mention what he said in this statement here. He said that Israel's government cannot run a racist government. Didn't give any reason why he thought Israel was racist. He also said you cannot turn your back on a two-state solution. You cannot demean the Palestinian people there. Since when does the U.S. tell Israel that they can't turn their back on a two-state solution when, for decades, the world, Israel has been trying to, there's been this two-state solution rhetoric. They've been trying to create this Palestinian state. They've been trying to give land to the Palestinians. They've been trying to create peace. It has never worked. Israel indeed has given a ton of land to the Palestinians, a ton of land to her Arab neighbors to make peace. And no, it has not worked. Israel now has several peace treaties with some of the Arab neighbors, so you can say maybe that has worked. We'll see if that lasts and how long that lasts. But the Palestinian people themselves, even giving away Gaza, gave the piece of land to create a Palestinian state, basically an autonomous Palestinian zone. What happened? It became a terrorist state. And since then, many Israeli lives have been lost because of that move, and because it was immediately built into this terror-run area. Horrible for the Palestinian people because it's run by these terrorists, and also it's very bad for the state of Israel because it's a huge security threat. They shoot hundreds and hundreds of rockets almost every year into Israeli civilian centers. So the two-state solution for Israel has never worked. They've been trying to appease the Palestinians, been trying to do it. It has never worked. There's no indication that it will ever work in the future. And it's very suicidal for the state of Israel to commit to doing something like this. If they were to give the entire West Bank, as they want to do, to the Palestinian people for a two-state solution, it would be suicide for Israel. The West Bank, the mountains here are the highlands. They could shoot rockets. They could shoot missiles down into the civilian urban areas of Israel, the central coastline, Tel Aviv, Jaffa, Netanyahu, all these areas. They could shoot right in there. Not only that, but they can create weapons. They can create massive training camps. Terrorists would be able to just come right into the state of Israel and commit terror attacks. It would be suicidal for the state of Israel because the Palestinian leadership, Palestinian people have said this publicly. They're not trying to hide it. They teach it to their children in kindergarten and schools that their goal is to wipe out the nation of Israel, wipe the Jews off the map. Ethnic cleansing, rid the land of Israel from Jews. They call it the occupation. End the occupation. Their goal is to kick them entirely out of the state of Israel. So saying that Bernie Sanders that was kind of the long tangent on what the two-state solution means. So saying that Israel cannot turn its back on a two-state solution, that the U.S. wouldn't support that, the U.S. should cut aid to Israel, it's completely ridiculous, completely insane to say anything like that. He went on little more. We got a little more to talk about with Bernie Sanders. So the interviewer noted to Bernie Sanders that the Biden administration has been very careful in criticizing Israel. Here's what Bernie Sanders said. He said, well, I'm not careful about it. I'm embarrassed that Israel, you have a government of that nature right now. You cannot give if you have whether it's Saudi Arabia or other authoritarian societies, if a government is acting in a racist way and they want billions of dollars from taxpayers of the United States, I think you say, sorry, but it's not acceptable. You want our money? Fine. This is what you got to do to get it. End quote. So that was what he said in response to the interviewer saying that the Biden administration has been very careful in criticizing Israel. Sorry, but if the Biden administration has been careful in criticizing Israel, I'm very scared to know what it would look like if they were not careful in criticizing Israel, because the Biden administration has been constantly making statements, harsh criticism of this new government, of what they're doing, saying maybe the left wouldn't consider it criticism, but coming out against what Israel is doing with inside Judea and Samaria when they legalized these new settlements last week in response to the terror attacks, the judicial reforms, saying a lot of things, telling Israel to be cautious, telling Israel to stop, to slow down. We'll talk about that in just a minute. So I don't think that the Biden administration has been very careful in criticizing Israel. They've been very free, actually, in expressing their opinion of what they think Israel should do in their own country, what they think Israel should do in the government. It's kind of crazy, but Bernie Sanders here is saying that he's not careful about criticizing Israel, and obviously with this whole thing, basically saying that if Israel wants billions of dollars of taxpayers' money from the United States, which the United States gives aid to Israel, he's saying that Israel needs to change these things. Basically, and he didn't exactly expressly say that, but he's saying that if they don't do these things, we shouldn't be sending them money. We should have these strings attached to sending him this aid to Israel. And Israel is one of the U.S. is one of the U.S.'s greatest allies, the only ally there, or the greatest ally specifically. I think they might be the only one in the Middle East. But it's crazy. It's crazy. And if Bernie Sanders got their way, I can't imagine what would happen. Just Israel be completely left alone. And right now they're receiving a lot of criticism from the U.S., but still there is that tie between the two countries of coming together there as well. So yeah, that's what Bernie Sanders said. Take it or leave it. I know most of you probably aren't a fan of his already, but I did want to point that out, and that we have these guys in the United States, politicians, lawmakers, who are very vocal about their hate for Israel and about what their ignorance, if it is ignorance, about what's actually going on here in the land of Israel. And speaking about criticism, I mean, I was just talking about the Biden administration hasn't been very careful in criticizing Israel. Perfect example right here. Just this last weekend, the U.S. ambassador, Thomas Nides, said that Israel needs to pump the brakes on its judicial reforms. So he said that the Biden administration is calling on Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to slow legislation of the government's plan to change the judicial system. Excuse me. He said, Thomas Nides said, quote, "At the end of the day, the United States is not going to be in a position to tell and to dictate to Israel how they pick their Supreme Court. I don't think we should do that." He said, "The one thing that binds our countries together is a sense of democracy and a sense of democratic institution. That's how we defend Israel at the UN. That's how we stand up for the values that we share." So basically in this statement, saying that Israel's and the U.S. share one thing that binds them together is the sense of democracy, is the democratic institution. And I would agree and disagree with that statement. Yes, Israel, the thing that binds them together is democracy. That's one of the things coming together. And another thing is that Israel and America share the founding of America and what it used to be. It's kind of moving away from that right now, but Judeo-Christian values is one of the main things that America and Israel that bind them together as two allies in similar cultures is the Judeo-Christian foundations of the United States of America. And where that's leading us today it seems to be a different story entirely. But he's saying that the thing that binds us together is a sense of democracy, insinuating that Israel, by putting forth these judicial reforms, will be moving away from democracy. It's a very audacious thing to say from the U.S. ambassador, because Israel is trying, through these judicial reforms, is trying to make their the selection of the Supreme Court to be like all the other democracies, or most of the other democracies around the world. America is one of them. U.S. ambassador, your country has its judicial system set up like Israel once is trying to change it to be like. Right now, and I'm sure Thomas Nides and the Biden administration would love to have the judicial system set up like it is in Israel right now, because it's basically the left reelecting themselves over and over and over and over again. So I'm sure Thomas Nides and the Biden administration would love that. But it's by no means pushing away from democracy by saying that this needs to be a more collective effort to pick the Supreme Court. It needs to be, it can't be the justices reappointing themselves over and over again. So there's this endless lock of the judicial system by the left, and this is the way it's been in Israel for decades. They're trying to change that to make it like every other democratic country in the world, like the US, like the UK, like France, all these places. This is how they do the judicial system, and Israel is trying to change it to be like that. Much more democratic. The voice of the people matters in who is actually elected to the Supreme Court. So there you go. That's Thomas Nides criticizing Israel on behalf of the Biden administration. And he wasn't saying this directly speaking to an Israeli official or anything, but obviously he's the ambassador, so anything he says on these policies directly affects the state of Israel. So Netanyahu said some great things, and he wasn't actually, this was not like directly responding to Thomas Nides, because obviously there wasn't like a direct conversation here. So Thomas Nides made this statement on an interview, I think it was CNN or something. And so Netanyahu was making what I'm about to tell you. It was actually at a conference in Jerusalem, I believe over the weekend. It might have been yesterday on Sunday. So Netanyahu made some great statements, basically responding to Thomas Nides without actually saying that he was responding to it. He said, in case you haven't noticed, Israel is in the midst of a little debate on judicial reform. And if you've ever seen Netanyahu speak, he's one of the greatest orators of our day. I think he's a great speaker, excellent speaker. But he said, in case you haven't noticed, Israel's in the midst of a little debate on judicial reform. I'd love to speak to you at length and tell you shouldn't worry, but I'd just like to tell you 3 things. First, Israel is a democracy and will remain a democracy with majority rule and proper safeguards for civil liberties. The second thing, all democracies should respect the will of other free peoples, just as we respect their democratic decisions. The third is that there has been a lot of rhetoric that is frankly reckless and dangerous, including calls for bloodshed in the street and calls for civil war. It ain't going to happen. There is not going to be a civil war. End quote. So that's what the statements he made at this conference. And obviously talking about the rhetoric calling for calling for bloodshed and civil war, that has been coming from the left here in Israel, from the guys who were just empowered, Yair Lapid and Benny Gantz, calling for riots in the streets, calling for these kind of things because of this move by Netanyahu to push more democracy, to make the will of the people more prevalent in the judicial system in Israel right now. And yeah, so basically his kind of little hint, maybe you could say, at Thomas Nides, he said, all democracies should respect the will of other free peoples, just as we respect their democratic decisions. And you guys realize this is not a tiny minority here in Israel that's trying to push for these reforms. This right-wing government was voted in with a 64-seat majority. A majority of the people of Israel want this to happen. So that's really all we need to say about it. This is a democrat. This is a free nation, a free people. They voted for this to happen. This is what they're trying to push through. So there you go. There's a little bit on the judicial reforms, about what's going on, about America criticizing Israel, Bernie Sanders criticizing Israel. Not surprising, but nevertheless, we need to talk about it because people need to know that what these politicians stand for, and people need to know about their hatred for the state of Israel.
Did you know that when Jesus overturned the tables in the temple, the Gospels tell us that zeal for the house consumed him? Did you know that when Jesus was lost in Jerusalem for 3 days as a 12-year-old, he assumed his parents would look for him in the temple? Did you know that Jesus told his disciples he was going to prepare rooms for them in the temple? Ben Hilton's book, Jesus Loves the Temple, will explain all of these stories about Jesus' love for the temple in Jerusalem. Purchase the book today by clicking the link in the description below or by ordering it on Amazon. With the return of the Jewish people to their land in 1948, after 2,000 years of exile, and the return of the Temple Mount to Jewish hands in 1967, Christianity has been forced to deal with re-examining theological issues that were thought to be long settled with the absence of the Jewish people from their land. Among these issues are Christian Zionism, replacement theology, and now the need for a temple in Jerusalem. Join the author Ben Hilton as he takes a fresh look at the issue of a Jewish temple in Jerusalem as seen through the lens of Christian tradition, Jewish thought in Scripture, and Jesus the Messiah himself. Everything you thought about a Jewish temple in Jerusalem and our Messiah's heart for the temple might be different than what you thought. Find out for yourself by ordering Ben Hilton's book, Jesus Loves the Temple. Click the link in the description below.
Here in Israel, mainly in Jerusalem, there have been some, you could say, and some riots by the Israeli Arabs in East Jerusalem, Eastern Jerusalem. But Hamas just yesterday or the day before called for Israeli, Israeli Arabs to commit terror attacks. Commit terrorism, basically. So after some Arabs in Eastern Jerusalem rioted and set up roadblocks on Saturday night, the spokesperson for Hamas in Jerusalem put out this call. He said, the spokesperson for Hamas, he said, quote, "The civil uprising of the Arab residents in Jerusalem is an important step to curb the aggression of the occupation and the escalation of its crimes and actions that harm our people. The Palestinian resistance organizations, excuse me, will never break and will never fear the terror of the occupation, and this rebellion is not the end of the story in dealing with the crimes of the occupier and its terrorist decisions." Goes on and on. He said, "Our people will continue the uprising with all the means at their disposal to protect themselves and to protect the Al-Aqsa Mosque. The uprising will expand to all neighborhoods, and our people will not rest until the occupation comes to an end and freedom and independence are achieved." Our people will not rest until the occupation comes to an end and freedom and independence are achieved. So first of all, he said the civil uprising of the Arab residents of Jerusalem is an important step to curb the aggression of the occupation. And he says the terror, he even calls them the terrorist decisions or the terrorism by this occupation, which talking about the Israeli government, about Israelis in general. So first of all, the civil uprising, okay, they rioted in East Jerusalem, but you know also what they've been doing, people from East Jerusalem. The horrible terror attack last week that killed the 2 young children and the third Israeli man, the guy from Eastern Jerusalem, rammed his car into a crowd of people, killing 3. This is the civil uprising he's talking about? Absolutely ridiculous. This is insane that somebody, obviously this is the spokesperson for a terrorist organization, but he's calling for saying this is a civil uprising. Absolutely not. It's not a civil uprising. This is terrorism happening against the people of Israel. He also called on Israeli Arabs, excuse me, my throat. He also called on Israeli Arabs to fight against the occupation and force Israel to withdraw from its racist policies. So first of all, he says civil uprising, then he says end the occupation. What he means by that, talked about earlier, complete annihilation of Israel. Occupation is not talking about East Jerusalem and West Bank and Gaza. Obviously Gaza not anymore. It's talking about the entire state of Israel, and the Palestinians will tell you that. Any of the Palestinians will tell you that. If you ask them, what is the occupation? It's the state of Israel, period. And also, so he's calling on Israeli Arabs all across the country to aid the Arabs from Eastern Jerusalem in this civil uprising, terrorism. You need calling for Israeli Arabs to commit terrorism. This is absolutely crazy. This can't really stand, can't continue forward. These terrorist leaders can't be making statements like, I mean, obviously they're going to make statements, but why isn't the world saying anything? Why isn't the world coming behind Israel to fight against these terror organizations? Absolutely, absolutely crazy. All right, guys, here is your misinformation, fake news tweet for the day. This one comes from Muhammad Shahaba, and he put on Twitter a tweet, a little video. He said, remarkable, Palestinians in Jenin set up some barriers to block daily #Israeli fatal raids. IDF vehicles couldn't get in, so no one from either side was killed, no homes destroyed, no children orphaned. Imagine the countless lives saved if the IDF simply left the Palestinians alone. And then there's a video of the street that was blocked off and the Israeli military vehicles sitting there at the end of the street. This is crazy because he's insinuating, not even insinuating, just saying outright that if since Israel wasn't allowed to go into that street and do what it was going to do, which they were going into, I'm sure, to arrest terrorists in that street, he's saying no one was killed, no homes destroyed, and no children orphaned. Because the Israeli army the occupation forces just go in and kill children at random. They go in and destroy homes at random because they're a horrible, evil terrorist force. No. You guys know it. You guys know the truth. If you've watched the Israel guys, if you know anything about the state of Israel, if you've been here, you see right off the bat, that is absolutely 100% false. And his last statement, you could turn that around. He said, imagine the countless lives saved if the IDF simply left the Palestinians alone. Actually, there was countless lives. Might be lost, unfortunately, because they're not going in. They weren't able to go in and arrest those terrorists. Terrorists go out and kill more people. Can't happen. And unfortunately, that's the state of things happening right there. Somebody commented and said they are only in Jenin because Palestinian terrorists won't leave Israelis alone. 100% true. And somebody else commented and said, if you want us to do it by drone, so be it. So if they can't get in with the vehicles, Israel can easily go in and take out the terrorists by drone. Somebody responded and said, imagine the countless Jewish lives lost if the Palestinians simply left, if the Israelis simply left the Palestinians alone. Unfortunately, that's a very, very true statement there. So there you go. That's the misinformation tweet for the day. Anti-Israel tweet for the day coming to you from Muhammad, Muslim here. I'm sure he's probably here. Could be somewhere else. But yeah, spreading lies on the internet. That is their favorite game of anybody who's tried to push forward a false reality, tried to push forward propaganda. Easiest way to do it now because we have internet, we have access, we have social media. Just do it there. Spread your propaganda there. Guys, remember that Israel's government is not racist. Don't listen to Bernie Sanders. Don't listen to Thomas Nides. And on the contrary, Israel bends over backwards to help the Palestinian people, to assist the Arabs living here in the state of Israel. And at the same time, this government is saying no to terrorism and violence. This new government that they're calling racist, they're actually standing up and saying we are not going to stand for terrorism. We're not going to stand for violence against our citizens. And this senseless attacks and violence need to end. That is what the new government is doing. They're not racist. Guys, make sure you subscribe and get the conversation going in the comments below. As always, tune out the fake news and tune in to what is actually happening in the land of Israel. We'll be back every day, Monday through Friday, with your direct connection to the land and people of Israel.